Pressed by Tortes, the set, the kick, and the pitch. It's deep to left field. This one may be off the wall, maybe in the screen. Home run! Home run to Bucky Dent!
Lang and Cherokee on top as expected. They're eligible for Salt Lake City.
Shoots from downtown for three. Right there with Billy Mills. Billy Mills pouring on the steam. Billy Mills is ready, putting it up. Billy Mills has the lead for the United States. Heading towards the finish line. Billy Mills. The state Billy Mills has just won the men's 10,000-meter event. The first time the United States has ever won this event. Billy Mills.
Plunkett on a straight drop back. Here comes the rush. Up top. Can't find anybody else. It's up running to the left. Rolls on the move. And it's caught by King at the 40. Takes it out to the 50. And all the way. Touchdown Raiders.
Welcome to NDN All-Star. Hi, it's Bill Black with the NDN All-Stars Podcast. I'm here with Traci Sorell, author extraordinaire. We're going to be talking about a new book that came out in conjunction with illustrator Aragon Starr called Contenders. I have it right here, my official copy, thanks to Amazon. And talking about World Series, where two great Native American baseball players faced off, Charles Albert Chief Bender and John Tortes Meyers, in 1911, right? 1911 World Series? Yeah.
Yes,
Okay. I've researched both of them. They are members of my NDN All-Star team. And as you can see, I dressed for the occasion. I'm wearing my
there you go.
shirt. I was really excited. I came across an article online talking about the announcement of your book, and I got I got to find out more. So I bought the book and reached out, and graciously you've taken the time to talk to me a little bit about that. And so first of all, can you tell us all a little bit about you? I mean, you're an author. You have some other children's books and young adult books that are fabulous. But please.
Sure.
CO.
Sure. Yeah. CO Traci Sorell, Dogodo, Jijalagi, G Elohi. I am Traci Sorell, and I am a citizen of the Cherokee Nation. I'm a mom of now a teen, and I have worn many hats in life. Currently, I'm a children's book author, so I write books for young people from birth to age 17, 18. And Contenders is my 8th book. I write fiction and nonfiction. Like I say, I love that, and I have loved fiction and nonfiction since I was a young person. I came about writing for young people because I was disturbed once my son entered preschool that really the curriculum, and of course, once he got into elementary school, even more so, hadn't changed since I was a student myself, in elementary school and proceeding through kind of K-12 education. And I thought, okay, now, it's the 21st century. So I went to school back in the 70s and 80s. Well, what is going on? And I just didn't want young people, my mom was always like, if there's a problem, how do you become part of the solution? So I thought, I am a first generation college graduate, and I majored in Native American Studies at UC Berkeley. So that's really the first time that I learned that beyond kind of the Cherokee Nation, which I'm a citizen of, and tribes around us that also were forcibly removed from our southeastern homelands to Indian Territory, or what is now Oklahoma, it was the first time I really learned that systematically removal's happening to lots of tribes across the country. But then I also learned, about other policies and things that happened to certain Native nations and areas that I didn't know anything about. So when my son gets the typical mythical Thanksgiving, people dressing up as natives, the paragraph about the Trail of Tears in history, and our history starts when Columbus arrives, and then we kind of just exit stage left, and no one knows about us right after 1900. I thought, my gosh, all this information we have access to, and curriculum hasn't been updated. So that's when the fix is in, right? That it's purposeful. And so trade published literature, like the kind I write, Contenders and other works, really does supplement what people provide in their home, their schools, and libraries. And so that's what I publish, and really work to bring other Native people who want to write and illustrate, into the profession, along with many other people who are doing that work. I mean, we're in a wonderful time now where there are lots of Native people contributing their words and their art to literature for young people, fiction and nonfiction. So it's a great time. It also is a time of book bans, where people are absolutely attacking that presence, right? Creating obstacles for kids to, our young people to see themselves, and for their peers to see them, and to know, that we are still here, and we have always been here, and we will always be here. Yeah.
That is fabulous. Keep it up. That is definitely a big hole that needs to be filled. And I live here in Omak, the Colville Indian Reservation, and in Washington, and we go downtown to the library. The books about and by Native authors, pretty small little section. And the more that we can do to help fill that up that's all great work. So keep it up. I'm proud and pleased that you're doing that. That's excellent.
Well, no, thank you. Well, like I say, I'm one of just many people doing that work. But it is, you have to be very intentional about creating those spaces and bringing other people into the field as well. And similarly, I always tell people, like, make sure that you are requesting Native created works for your local library to purchase, because that's how more of our young people, and adults too, because adults don't know much of anything,
right,
as well. I mean, they've gone through the same educational system. That's how we combat the ignorance, right? I mean, it's intentional to keep people uninformed, and ultimately that undermines our sovereignty and the ability of, our future generations to continue and thrive. Yeah.
Okay. So now let's transition to baseball.
Yeah. Love baseball.
So here's kind of I don't know, maybe a random question for you. How did you pick these guys?
That actually is pretty simple. So I'm a baseball fan.
Yeah.
Aragon, the illustrator, is also a baseball fan.
Okay.
We were introduced to baseball and came to love it because of our mothers. Both of our mothers are huge baseball fans.
Excellent.
And so we grew up, watching baseball, and I married a baseball fan. So my husband was reading a book, and he said, "Have you heard of the Indian against Indian World Series?" I was like, "The what?" I said, "No, what is that?" And so he's like, "Yeah, in 1911, these two Indian baseball players played against each other in the World Series." And I was like, "Come again?" So I had no idea, that this had been, a big thing in the press and all of this. So he hands me the book, and I start reading about Charles Bender and John Meyers. And I was like, there's a story there. because I know there are a lot of young people who have no clue that, I mean, not that young people haven't known their native people play baseball. Of course, I think they know that. But that there are two men who have very different paths in arriving at that championship game, right? At the highest level of their sport. And I thought this is an amazing story that young people need to know about, right? Because I mean, in life, there's no one way to do things. There's no one path. Like we can end up in various places. And so I love that aspect of it. And also that, that they're continuously doing their jobs, right? Their professions in an environment that is so hostile to them. Yes. They are constantly being heckled by fans, by teammates, by opposing players, sometimes by their managers, right? Not being allowed to work and exist in their full humanity. And the coverage in the press is incredibly racist, right? And they're both called chief. Yeah. When we all know that a chief is a tribal leader, but it's a diminutive term, right? It's to insult them and to tear them down, much in the way that people would use boy to, an African-American man. And so it's like insulting on so many levels. And I thought to myself, how are these men like continuing to show up every day, right?
Right. And not only that, but
so that's the impetus of the story, is that he introduced me to them. And then as I read a little bit more about them, I was like, wow, kids I know are going to, enjoy this story because it's not something we've heard about, but they're both fascinating people.
Exactly. And, you talk about the different ways to get to that level. Bender jumped right in, 19 years old, right?
Yeah.
Meyers
and see, that's
forever to get to the big leagues.
Right. And see, that's a bigger part of our national history that we don't talk about. So a lot of native baseball players and native players that went into the National Football League, right, during that time and after that, they're coming out of the boarding school system. Yeah. So what I did not realize, and I recently read a very thick biography by David Marinus about Jim Thorpe, who was John Meyers' teammate by 1913. He wasn't there on that team at that time, but was that so many of these federally run and sometimes missionary boarding schools were like these, almost like a puppy mill type thing, like churning these players out, negotiating their contracts. That's why they would have games against colleges to sell tickets, and they were taking part of that proceeds, right, for the school and the administrators. So they were doing the same thing with these athletes. So Charles Bender, who grows up on his reservation to the age of 7, then goes to a boarding school in Philly, and he's there for 5 years without going home. And what makes him have to go to the boarding school is that his family had been in what is now North Central Minnesota. And when all the Ojibwe people in northern Minnesota were kind of sent to different reservations, his mother and the kids were given allotments in White Earth. So he went over to like the northwest side of Minnesota. It was very hard to make a living in the conditions there in terms of farming. And his dad is a German-American man. So at age 7, he goes off to boarding school, as do other siblings, because it's, he's going to have food provided for and, shelter and all that kind of stuff. He came from a very large family. So he goes home at age 12. His father is abusive. He clearly has a temper. And Albert is like, this, I don't need this, And he and his brother end up going then back to boarding school, but this time to Carlisle. And Carlisle is one of those boarding schools with Coach Pop Warner, that is really churning out and working on having athletes going to the NFL, going to baseball, etc. So that's how he gets there so early at 19. He definitely had natural ability, fantastic eyesight. He was a wonderful skeet shooter, very talented person, worked on his pitching. John Meyers, on the other hand, is living, sometimes in the res, most of the time in Riverside, and he learns the game there and plays it. And then raised by a single parent. His dad died when he was younger, and he's from the Cahuilla tribe.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think east of Los Angeles, again, Riverside and south of there, where the Santa Rosa band of Cahuilla Indians Reservation is, that's where he grew up. So he, goes to work for Santa Fe Railroad, starts playing on the railroad team. Then he plays in some kind of bush league minor teams around the Southwest and up in the in Montana area and stuff. And then a player sees him from one of these opposing teams and says, "Hey, let's get you over here to Dartmouth because you're, a big guy." I mean, he's not like some, thin player. I mean, he can play football and baseball, but he had no desire to play football. But they get him over to Dartmouth. He wants to play baseball. They wanted to play football. And ultimately, he leaves Dartmouth and heads to the pros. And he's 28 when he goes into the league.
Yeah.
And yet, if you think about, if anyone knows anything about catching, you have to be a tremendous athlete, right?
Yes.
Because you're down in the crouch all the time. So not only is he a fantastic catcher, he leads the team in batting for 3 years, and he's third in the National League overall. Again, at what we would now call like a really old baseball player, right? Someone who's 28 presumably has been in the league for a long time.
Mm-hmm. And he's just coming in.
So I thought, again, this is fascinating to me, and I feel like it would be fascinating to young people. And what I've heard so far is, that they're very much enjoying the story because it's not your kind of typical thing, but yet they see in today's world that there are native baseball players and the environment for baseball in the 21st century isn't a lot different.
Yeah.
Because Ryan Helsley, right, is in the news, who's a Cherokee Nation citizen,
yes,
excellent pitcher for the Cardinals, is talking about how, like, I don't want to be, listening to this tomahawk chop and this chant stuff when I'm playing the Braves.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm here to do my job. This is just disrespectful, right? And so this is over 100 years ago that this World Series takes place. And yet we're in the same place in many respects.
Have some of the same challenges to face, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's a big piece of why that's important to expose kids to that.
Mm-hmm.
And but then to have these two pretty stellar examples of guys that worked through that and had real staying power, played a long time, and really took the high road there. I remember reading a little anecdote about Bender getting mad at the crowd one time and yelling at them, "Foreigners, foreigners."
Yeah.
That's funny to me. That's a great line.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you think about it. So, in most cases, if you, a lot of times with allotment. So first of all, for viewers who don't know, folks listening, Native people were not considered citizens of the United States once the United States was formed. So that citizenship happens over time. And oftentimes when the federal government came in and allotted a reservation, which meant they divided up the communally held land into individual pieces of land and assigned it to tribal citizens, at that point they were conferred U.S. citizenship, generally speaking. But not always, but generally. But by 1924, then you have the Indian Citizenship Act. And so oftentimes Native people were the foreigners in their own land, because of these United States policies. And so I'm not sure, I know for when the Cherokee Nation reservation was allotted, citizenship was conferred on citizens. I'm not sure I'm assuming, but I don't know for sure if that same thing happened during the allotment of with Minnesota, Ojibwe people up there. And when they were sent over to, his mother, Mary, and the kids were all sent over to live in the White Earth Reservation. But certainly John Meyers, and his family being in, their area and then in Riverside and stuff. I mean, he's considered, a foreigner and he's playing baseball. So it's this most horrible of ironies to be a foreigner in your own land. And so, when Bender is saying that, it's like, who really is the foreigner? I mean, like, what are you talking about?
We're here first. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Who is of this land? And it's not you, Yeah.
So here's a question for you.
Sure.
We got two giants of the game then, and that's not a New York Giants joke. That's just the way it came out. Sorry. If you had to pick one, which of the two is your favorite? Knowing a little bit about their stories, I mean, I'm putting you on the spot, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to say a favorite. I admire them for different reasons, but I guess in my heart, I'm a little closer to Meyers because I got to meet his great nephew and two great nieces, and just wonderfully warm people, talking about their uncle, because he never had children of his own. And so it was great to meet them during this process. And I grown up here within my reservation and then spent my teenage years out in San Diego. So I've been up, in the area, which is, where he grew up is just north of where I lived. And so I've been up in that area, and so I'm just kind of more, I guess it's more of the geography, but also getting to meet his people, but I mean, like I say, I admire both men, tremendously because of the difficulties and the challenges they played under, and really just the lack of understanding by people around them for what they were enduring. Being in places where that heckling's going on, oftentimes they're fighting to be able to stay with the team, during road trips. And again, that level of disrespect when you're at the height of your game. I mean, Bender, his manager repeatedly would talk about how, if he had to have one pitcher in that clutch point, it was always going to be Bender. And similarly, Meyers' manager was equally complimentary of him. So, and that's what really hurt, in the 1911 World Series, Bender's team, the Philadelphia Athletics, are triumphant because of his pitching, and so it's just, I think, wow, for you to be able to compartmentalize, I guess, or put away that disrespect that's ongoing, in the middle of the game, because baseball is a mental game. I mean, you have to be really smart. And in Meyers, right, as the catcher generally your catcher is like your smartest person on the field, because they are calling the pitches. They know what every batter's, strengths and weaknesses are. And they're really watching all the stuff and signaling to everybody what's going on. So I just think, man, and in the midst of the heckling and all these things, you're keeping it together and staying focused on the game. That's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
So I have, like I say, profound respect for both of them, because it was not an easy time to be working in. Like I say, unfortunately, it's still not an easy time. We still have a lot of objectification of our culture and lack of respect in sports.
What's one takeaway? So my son's a little older now, but if this book was out, I would have bought it for him right away. And Actually, he read it. He's home from college right now, so he read it and thought it was pretty cool. But what's one takeaway that you would like young people reading this to have?
Certainly one of them is, just because you haven't heard about the contributions of Native people doesn't mean we haven't always been here and contributing. I know our presence is in so many different places, including professional sports like baseball. And so it disturbs me, when I see anthologies that come out about like the greatest baseball players and stuff. And I'm like, Charles Bender invented the slider. How can he not be in the book? But I've found several of these like that. And this is a pitch still used in baseball today. If you know anything about baseball, people are throwing the slider regularly. Yeah. So, don't just assume that all things have been done by, white men. I mean, oftentimes people are taking credit for things that they did not do.
Sure.
And that's been the case without history, but there's just been a lot of, I feel like, purposeful erasure of the contributions of Native people across a variety of fields. And so always understand that there's more to what is reality, what is truth, that oftentimes we are purposefully not taught or shielded from. And so with this book, I hope to, just kind of shine a light on that.
Crack that box open a little bit and look what's in here.
Absolutely. That the game of baseball would not be what it is today without them.
Yeah.
And certainly, like I say, as integral a pitch as the slider is, that is still used in lineups today all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
That's that's something that most people don't even know that.
No, not at all.
Yeah. So
Not at all. Yeah. Yeah.
So now let me.
Can I share just a couple of the interior artwork?
Yes, please.
So
I was going to do that too, but please go ahead.
Yeah. So one of the things is, with a picture book, the illustrator is carrying more than half of the story.
Sure.
You have the text, but really the job of the illustrator is to take that and elevate it far beyond anything you read in the text. So every time anyone's reading the book, really look at the pictures, because they are designed to go beyond what's in the text. And so one of the things that I love, again, because these two men have had their identities erased, and their contributions, is that Aragon from the beginning starts out with these wonderful end papers, and she shows each of the kind of architectural designs of their stadiums. And so Meyers plays for the New York Giants and Bender plays for the Philadelphia Athletics. But you've got along the bottom, Cahuilla people are known for their basket work. So here you've got the baseball diamond, a baseball player within the basket woven, and at the top, Ojibwe people are known for that floral pattern. And so you've got the baseballs there.
Yes.
And she carries that over to the title page. If you look at the baseball bats here, you've got the basketry. And so there's those kinds of things. But then really she brings us into the action. She has done a lot of comics illustration. This is her very first picture book. And I love how
found a whole new market.
She captures how everyone looks differently. So many times you'll see in children's illustration, everyone's faces are the same. That's not reality, right? We all look different. The other thing that I love that she does, I'm going to take off the jacket cover here, is that she really centers their home life, their childhood. I start out with talking about the game where they meet up. And then we kind of go back into their childhood and talk about what is that path to the majors, because it's a book for young people.
Sure.
And so it's important to share, how did these people get to that place? Sometimes books will just talk about someone's accomplishments.
Right.
And so I love how she, again, uses the Ojibwe floral pattern to center Bender's story. I love the old time use of the pictures that you find like in your grandparents' photo albums, the corners you slide in. And then on Meyers, she's got the Cahuilla basket pattern. just a wonderful use of things. And then I'll come over to, I love just how do we display all these different teams that Meyers played for without cluttering that up in the text? Yep. She just makes some baseball cards at the bottom.
Make it baseball.
Know?
Yeah. It really is a great visual blend of baseball history and Native history and the visuals that are so rich in both.
Yeah, and here's her comics background, right, coming in with the panels. Because after we talk about their journeys, then we go back into the game and really go through, the series. Mm-hmm. And the way she conveys the action is just amazing. I don't know if there was a certain spread you loved. I love this at the end where she's kind of sharing, what do tickets look like? What do programs look like of that era? Really, I'm not talking about that in the text, but she's, sharing that. And that's what I mean by going beyond. Yeah. But this final spread with showing just, a few of the baseball players from the historic to the current. And then also, again, that contemporary society, right? People are mocking our culture. And here's Native people, just saying no. So, and in the back, there's an author's note about, who all helped me with this, a timeline that kind of situates them in history and things about their life and baseball history. And then all my sources, because the other thing for young people is, I want them to know that they can look up any of those sources and find out for themselves, read, the interviews with the players and hear their words and make sure that I'm quoting them correctly, etc. Because oftentimes as Native people, we find that folks, will make up stuff about us. They'll take things out of context, right? They will
or they
not
find an
understand.
old article that wasn't researched. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. You'll have people that assume they know what our culture is or what something means. And so I'm always very intentional about that just because of the misrepresentations I've seen about my own tribe and other tribes. So I'm excited to have it out in the world and just look forward to hearing from, folks who have read it, what they think about it.
Excellent. I'm going to get a copy of it for our local library and I'm a high school art teacher and I'm going to have one get one for the school as well.
Fantastic.
I know it's a young kid's book, but I think our high school kids would dig it too. So.
Oh, absolutely. And again, I think in an art class, it's very, good to say, hey, this was illustrated by a Native artist and look how she's doing.
I'm going to talk to Aragon, I think next week. And
fantastic.
And I'm going to try and set up a time where maybe she can talk to my art kids next year. Tomorrow's the last day of school here. So, but I'm hoping that maybe we can work that out so she can talk to the art kids and tell them about her story too, and talk about Super Indian and all that stuff. But
yeah, absolutely. Because she didn't go to art school, so she didn't go to school to learn how to do this. I didn't go, I didn't major in this in college, and so that's another thing too. Much like Bender and Meyers, we both learned this by just putting the work in, right? And getting the experience. And so that's another lesson that I would want young people to understand too and take away from the book is that even the people that have created this book didn't start out this way, but we both have a love of young people, of baseball, of making sure that we're represented accurately. And so we're willing to put in the work and do what's necessary to, share an accurate story and help combat the erasure and invisibility that we often face in, like I say, K-12 curriculum, but sometimes in the larger society in general. Yeah.
So I have two other quick questions for you.
Sure. Yeah.
What was the biggest surprise that you found? Is there like one thing that stands out, biggest surprise as you were researching this book?
Mm-hmm.
Aside from the slider thing.
I shouldn't say it was a huge surprise. I mean, because I know people are kind of underhanded about things. But that the player on the other team that from the Bush League kind of era that really wanted Meyers to come to Dartmouth had a fake high school diploma because he didn't graduate from high school, had a fake diploma created and sent to Dartmouth. And in essence, it's clear that they knew that he wasn't this person that was on the diploma. But they went along with it until I think maybe some kind of review board or something got involved.
Right.
And then they kicked him out. But they were happy to have him there and use him for their sporting program.
Right.
And so I just thought, oh my gosh, so all of these underhanded things and kind of but Meyers loved being there in the classroom and taking those classes, and he wished he could have gone to college, because he was so much older than all the other undergrads, right? He's in his mid to late 20s by the time this happens. It's just before he goes to the majors. So I just thought, wow, how interesting is this? Yeah.
Okay. Here's the big wrap-up question. Is there something that I'm stealing this from Dan Rather for his big interview show, which I think is fabulous? Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wish I would have, or anything that we didn't touch on that you think NDN All-Stars viewers need to know?
I mean, just know that there are many incredible Native professional baseball players.
Yes.
And others that were in the minor leagues that did not get to make a major league, debut and stuff. And so I'm hoping that these two men and the portrait of them would encourage you to look at others and also to look at other Native people in other sports and what their contributions have been. Because again, just because you haven't seen it or heard about it doesn't mean they don't exist and they didn't make contributions. There's a lot of wonderful stories just like this that we just haven't had out as easily accessible, but they're there.
Right.
And so my hope is that young people or and adults will be encouraged to find those stories and to write and illustrate and share them with everyone else.
Excellent.
Now, Wado for that question.
Okay, I couldn't think of a better answer. That's fabulous. So, okay, well, again, thank you for taking the time, and best of luck with the book. I'm going to shout from the rooftops about it and share it as often as I can, because I think it's fabulous. Not only the story, but the illustrations as well are top notch, and good job keeping up the mission of sharing the Native American athletes. That's our mission here, past and present.
Yeah.
And so again, thank you for your time, Traci, and hopefully when you do the next book, we can follow up on that one too.
That sounds great. Wado for having